All right, I want to welcome you to the 10 Biggest Coaching Mistakes webinar. And the subtitle is Learning to Grow Healthy, Lasting Groups. Because I've done a lot of methods, I've advocated a lot of methods over the years that will get you a bunch of groups in a hurry. But, sustaining those groups over time and keeping them going, it can be a bit of a different animal. And so we really want to start a lot of groups. We also want to keep a lot of groups in the process. All right, for those of you who don't know me, I have been a pastor for over 27 years. My wife and I have been married almost 18 years, coming up in April, and we have 4 children. My boys are 16, 12, and 4. Our daughter rather, is 10. And so we have a busy household. In the last 13 years, I have coached over 1,500 churches. And since 2011, I've helped churches start over 14,000 groups that have involved some 125,000 members, which is pretty mind-blowing to think about. What I do, I work with churches individually. I have coaching groups where I work with 5 churches at a time. I develop online courses. I do some one-time on-site consultations with churches. I've written a book, came out about a year ago, called Exponential Groups. You see it on the picture there. And also I blog over at alanwhite.org and try to get the word out there about what I've learned from all of my mistakes over the years. You can follow me on social media. On Twitter, I'm at Alan White. And on Facebook, you can find me at facebook.com/Alan White Consulting. So let's talk about these 10 biggest. Hello there. We're not going to use cameras today. But thank you for joining us. We're talking about the 10 biggest coaching mistakes. And as we get into this, here's one thing that I want to challenge you to do. We're going to have a contest, and the contest is to see who can be the best note taker. And for the person that has the best notes, you're going to win a copy of my book, I'm not hardback, but a paperback copy of the book, not a digital copy, but the actual book. And you can send your notes at the end of the webinar over to info@alanwhite.org, and I will choose a winner from the people that are on this webinar, and you may end up with a copy of my book. And if you don't want a copy of my book, I suppose you could sell them on eBay or something. All right, let's talk about these 10 mistakes. And as we get into this, some of these may sound familiar to you. Some of these you may be feeling right now, but I want you to know that you're in good company, because the reason I know these 10 mistakes is because I have committed all of them over the years and have found some ways to do things a little bit better. Probably the number one mistake is that you have small groups, but you don't have any coaching whatsoever. Back in 1994, we started groups at our church in California, and first time we rolled out groups, we were small back then. I think we were maybe 250 people, and we handpicked 10 great leaders, and we knew that they had the stuff. We knew that they had good character, and we formed groups, and those groups all started in January of 1994, and they all stopped in December of 1994. And we went back to them and said, hey, what's going on? And what they told us was that, we enjoyed the group, but we really felt like a lone ranger out there. Now, here's the interesting thing. I mean, our church is only 250 people. You still kind of know everybody and talk to everybody at that point, right? And so we talk to these people all the time. It's just that we didn't talk to them specifically. We didn't do intentional things to talk about small groups or leadership with them. And the result was we actually lost 100% of your group. So now you can pat yourself on the back because you're already smarter than I am. I know you are. So your groups are going to last for a while if they don't have coaches. Some of them are going to figure it out. Some of it, despite the fact that you don't have a lot of coaching or maybe even a lot of training, they're going to figure out good enough how to move forward as a group. Others are going to either quit or they're going to burn out. A lot of times, leaders will get into situations in a group that they feel like they should be able to handle, but maybe it's just completely out of their realm. Maybe it's someone who has a life controlling problem and they need some support. Maybe it's someone that needs counseling or is going through a traumatic time in their life. I mean, groups can certainly be there to love and to care for people, but they can't take care of all of those needs. And if we put our leaders in that situation, where they don't have a lot of backup, they may not last and they may become discouraged and quit for other reasons. Everybody needs encouragement. And it's not just a matter of, hey, getting them all together, you're doing a great job. They need specific encouragement. They need someone who sees, what God's doing in them and what God's doing through them and actually brings that up to them. Everybody needs to know that somebody cares. See, and that's what happened with our leaders, was that they did a good job. They enjoyed meeting in the groups, but they began to feel like that even though they were there, that nobody cared for them. So leaders need community with other leaders. Now, this seems kind of interesting, doesn't it? That leaders are leading community. They're leading community in their groups. And yet, if we're not coaching them, if we don't have those huddles going on, then we're not providing community for our leaders. So our leaders are leading community, and yet they're leading in isolation if we don't have any coaches that are building into their lives. And they do feel like Lone Rangers. And let's be honest, if you used to watch The Lone Ranger, even the Lone Ranger had Tonto, right? So we need to have somebody to walk alongside our leaders. The second mistake is that sometimes you get the people that are very eager to start a group, but if you don't have any coaches to support them, sometimes their group experience is very short-lived. So you've successfully recruited new leaders, whether you've handpicked those leaders or whether they came out of an established group, or whether you did a church-wide campaign and you made the cattle call for whoever wants to start a group, come join us. And they're eager to form their groups. But the problem is that new recruits are going to face some setbacks. We had a couple of leaders in our church that had stepped out of a group that they loved because they felt like they should start a new group. And this couple, we'll call them Ray and Pam because those were their actual names. And so Ray and Pam stepped out of the group to start this new group. And I happened to bump into them one Sunday morning and I say, hey, how's it going? And they said, well, we feel like we've made a mistake. I said, well, what do you mean? They said, we think maybe we shouldn't have stepped out of our group to start this group. I said, well, what happened? They said, wow, well, we made a list of 20 people to invite to our group, and all 20 of them said no. And on the outside, I'm like keeping a straight face, nodding, acknowledging what they're saying. On the inside, I was kind of blown away. I've never heard of anybody that had that bad of an experience. And so I told them, I said, you guys had an idea of what your group should be. But then I said, I think God has a different idea of what your group should be. So don't give up just yet. I said, let's pray and see who God intends to have in your group. They called me back a week later and they said, please stop sending people to our group. We've got 14 people in our group. Our living room is going to be full. They're going to have all their kids. Our house is going to be full. So please stop sending people to our group. Now, let me tell you the honest truth. How many people had I sent to their group? I hadn't sent anybody to their group, but they prayed and God sent people to their group. So here's the story. It wasn't that, Pastor Allen has the magic touch and he's the one that had the conversation. The significance wasn't that I had the conversation with them. The significance was that they had the conversation with them. And this didn't always work too well because, see, people, they can become easily discouraged. And if they do, then they may never start their group. We did a launch back in the fall of 2004, and we had 103 groups. Well, at least we thought we had 103 groups. And so in the middle of the series, we surveyed our group leaders, and one of the things we asked, we gave them a next step of a curriculum to start in January, and they were to take a break and do some social things, do some serving kinds of things over the holidays. And so we sent them a survey and said, how many of you would like to continue on and do this, next curriculum that we're offering? And I had, out of 103, 30 of the groups said that they weren't going to continue. And so, I sent them another survey. I just asked them 3 questions. Do you love Jesus? Do you want to go to heaven? What's your problem? Right? No, that's not what I said. I wanted to find out what happened with their group. And here's what I found out. Out of the 30 groups that weren't continuing, only 2 of them had actually done the study for 6 weeks and then decided they couldn't continue. The other 28 had never even started. And I didn't even know it until I took a survey in the middle of the series, and it was too late to help any of them. So it led me to a very valuable concept. I talk about this in my book, is that groups that don't start tend to not continue. I know that's corny, but it is true. If they don't start, they will continue. So how do you help them get started? You have to have someone there to encourage them and to answer their questions. And in any of us that have ever led groups, you have setbacks. Every person that you invite to your group doesn't say yes. But you want to keep them encouraged and keep them moving forward. And once we begin to do that with every single new recruit, whether we invited them or whether the pastor invited them from the platform, every single one from that point forward had somebody to walk alongside them and to encourage them and to check in on them. And we started far more groups that way. In fact, we turned around that January series in 2005. And so we went from 103, except we only had 73, we only had 75, and then 2 of them quit. We had 73. And then we turned around in the January series, we had 105 groups at that point. So we recovered what we lost and gained a couple more. And I'm not saying all that for the sake of numbers. What I'm saying is this. When somebody sticks their neck out and they've never done this before, we cannot throw them in the wolves. We cannot throw them in the deep end of the pool and make it sink or swim. We've got to help them. We've got to encourage them. And I know we can email them. I know that we can, pull them together for a meeting. But I got to be honest with you, that is not coaching, because coaching needs to be personal. The third coaching mistake is this: trying to coach by yourself. So some people say, well, if you want to get something, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And that's a myth. It really is a myth, because there is not enough of you to keep up with more than 8 people and do the rest of your job. And if you're like me, I never had the luxury of only being the small group pastor. I mean, one church, I was the adult ministries pastor, so anything to do with adults. I was the children's ministry pastor, so anything to do with children. I didn't have teenagers, because at the time I felt like I was allergic to teenagers, but I had all the adults, all the kids, and for a season, I even led worship. Now, I will admit that wasn't a great season. And even fast forward to the church I served here in Greenville, church of 6,500. I had one full-time assistant. I had all of the affinity groups, men's, women's, couples, singles, you name it, small groups, and then I had a system of classes and supervised all of that. So I wore a lot of hats, just like you're wearing a lot of hats. And what I discovered was the fewer people that I could have reporting to me, the better off it would be. But, when you start out early on with groups, especially when our church was smaller, I didn't really need coaches. In fact, coaches seemed to be like a little bit of an overkill because we didn't have that many leaders. But we got to a point, and for us, it was about 30% of our adults in groups, that I couldn't do an adequate job of connecting with anybody and do everything else that I needed to do. And so I had to determine who I was going to meet with and who I wasn't going to meet with, but I had to serve everybody. And for me, this is where coaching came in, because if you try to do it by yourself, you're going to feel lousy about the lack of coaching. You're going to feel guilty. Oh, I need to call those leaders. But, you have this whole other job that you're doing and you're exhausted. And this is where we need to get some help. And so in this situation, if you're trying to coach by yourself, your leaders are going to feel like mistake number one, that they're leading a group and they have no coach and they're a lone ranger out there, because no person can actually coach more than 5 leaders by themselves. And if you can do better than that, then I congratulate you. I couldn't do better than that. And especially if they're new leaders that need a lot of help. So the third mistake is coaching alone. The fourth mistake is having the wrong people as coaches. Having the wrong people as coaches. Now, the scenario kind of goes like this. You invite somebody out to a meal, and you present a job description to them about what coaching is all about. And then you pick up the check So, they're going to feel a little bit obligated, right? And they say yes, but then they don't end up doing anything. Now, maybe our directions weren't clear. Maybe they had good intentions. Um, Maybe they said yes out of loyalty. Maybe they were wanting to have the snazzy title of coach. But the reality was that just because they look like they might be a good coach, you don't know until they actually try coaching whether they would be a good coach or not. And what's awkward in this is that typically this group is all made up of volunteers. So if you bring somebody in as a volunteer and they don't do the things that you need them to do, well, then you have to fire them. And that's very awkward, at least in my experience. And so what you need is a system where they can give coaching a try. And they can at least see, they can see and you can see if they've got the stuff, if they have the availability, if they have the attention to give to group leaders. Because if they do, you want them to coach. If they don't, you don't want them to coach, because as we talked about before, with mistake number 1 of having groups and no coaches, or mistake number 2 of people eager to start a group and they don't have any support, there's a lot at stake. And if you don't have people that are willing to pick up the phone and make calls and go out for cups of coffee and these sorts of things, then your groups are going to be in trouble. It's almost better that, even if the org chart looks nice, if the org chart's not actually functioning, you really don't have anything, do you? All right, mistake number 5 is unclear expectations. Unclear expectations. What are coaches actually supposed to do? And many small group ministries get stuck here. We've heard a lot about coaching, and we read some of the classic works on coaching. We read the things that, Carl, George, and Warren Bird have put together, and they have wonderful teaching on coaching. We look at Dr. Bill Donahue and Greg Bowman and their work at Willow, and they have great teaching on coaching. And we can, Steve Gladen and Bill Willits and all of these guys. And so we have this idea of we need coaches. Maybe we're not exactly sure in a practical way what the coaches are supposed to do. And so I got this sense of, well, my leaders need some coaching. I need to recruit people. I need to recruit good people, not the wrong people like we were just talking about. And I recruited these good people that were willing to do this. And I wasn't really sure what to do. And for a long time, I didn't have any coaches, because I thought, well, I've got to figure out how coaching is going to help this. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's hard to work in it and on it at the same time. Because just when you're about to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write down the names of some candidates, or I'm going to rough out a job description of what I think coaches should do, somebody calls and, they're not going to be able to lead anymore. They have a big problem in the group, and you have to address that. And then you get, a communication card from the weekend about people that want to be placed into a group, and you have all of this busy stuff that's going on that, we succumb to the tyranny of the urgent, and we have a hard time breaking out of that and actually, beginning to build these things, these systems that are going to help us. And so the result from this is that we don't offer any coaching because we got stuck. We're not really sure what coaches are supposed to do. And we just, this is too much to think about and I have other things to do. Or our coaches end up being kind of bored and confused. So I have these 2 coaches. One was named Dan, one was named Carol. And I'm using actual names because you don't know them. And so I would have them do things that I couldn't do, but I also had them do things that I could do. And so we would bring all the leaders together, coaches and all the leaders, and we would have a huddle, and I would run the huddle. And huddle is language borrowing from Carl George and Dr. Warren Bird. And so the idea of once a month we would gather everybody together, and we would kind of have everybody catch up. So the coaches would be in a circle with their leaders, and then we would do a little bit of training. And typically I led the meeting, I ran the meeting, I did the training, all of that. So Carol comes to me one day and she says, I like the idea of working with these leaders, but she says, I'm kind of bored. And I said, well, why is Carol bored? Because I'm busy. And I thought, and then it dawned on me, well, the reason that Carol is bored is here I've recruited her and Dan, who are both capable people, both caring people. They have experience, they have maturity, and I'm getting in their way. I'm doing the coaching for them because I wasn't sure exactly how all of this was going to go. So I stayed right in the middle of it, but then my coaches got bored. Well, then I also had them go out and visit groups. And when they visited groups, they'd fill out a little report and turn it into me. And so one day Carol came along and she said, she says, I'm visiting these groups, but she says, when I go out to visit these groups, she tells me, I kind of feel like I'm your spy. And she said it mysterious like that. I'm your spy. And I thought, well, first of all, all she was doing was coming in and complaining. So I fired her immediately. I mean, good grief, who needs that? No, I did not fire her. But I thought, why does she feel like that I'm her? She's my spy, because she was going out, as my representative to visit the group, to fill out this report, to collect data on what the group was doing, and hand it back off to me. And the lesson that I learned in this was that I was delegating responsibilities. I was delegating duties to these coaches, but I hadn't delegated authority to these coaches. And that was a place of developing my relationship with coaches to the point that I felt like they could handle the authority and I could trust them with it. The other side of it is it involved me giving up some things. And I wasn't ready to do that yet. And we're going to cover that in number 6. So you must clearly define the role of the coach, what you expect them to do. And then the biggest thing is you got to do what you can to get out of your coach's way and let them do what God has gifted and called them to do. All right, number 6, keeping control. So hi, my name is Alan, and I'm a recovering control freak. All right. You don't want any problems. I didn't need any problems. I was busy. I had the adult ministries. I had the children's ministries. I was leading worship. I did not need any problems. I was busy. But if you don't know what leaders are doing, guess what? There are going to be problems. I had one group that I heard somewhere through the grapevine that they did the group met until midnight one night. And I said, what were you guys doing? They said, we were having a prayer meeting. I said, well, how often does that happen? Which I'm not against prayer, but midnight, boy. And next day, people got to go to work. They got to go to school. And they said, well, it only happened that once. I said, oh, okay. But you don't know what's going on out there. And so not keeping tabs on all of this eventually is going to come back to bite you. And so this was my thinking. And maybe you're like me. Is that we're in that situation where we feel like we need to keep control of this. And when we get in this mindset, we tend to overtrain people and we tend to over supervise them, even though you can't really over supervise them because there's only so much of you. But maybe you determine everything that they study. Maybe it's that kind of a dictatorial relationship. I think there's a place for that with new groups. But as groups gain experience, as groups gain maturity, as they have a better understanding of things that need to be addressed in their specific group, that doesn't work so well anymore. And here's the reality I had to face was how much control did I even have in the first place? I mean, God is in control and we can thank God for that. But personally, how much control did I have? So I could bring him into meetings that ended up being half empty because people hate meetings. Did you know this? People hate meetings. So you try to get them into all these meetings, they don't show up, and then you think that either badly of them or think that you're a terrible leader. People hate meetings. Just get over that. But if we line them up in rows and train them, first of all, are they paying attention? Second of all, do they remember it? Third of all, are they actually going to put this into practice? Probably not if we're overtraining them or giving them too much information instead of giving them what they need exactly when they need it. And so this is the place for me personally, and this may be the place for you, because I'll be honest with you. The biggest breakthrough I ever had in leading a small group ministry occurred between my own 2 ears. That was the biggest change, was what was going on in my head. So what can you let go of? What can you release to coaches that you trust? And if you don't trust them initially, then what do you need to do to build those relationships where you can trust them and trust God that they'll use their gifts to benefit the leaders? And then what can you never let go of? What are those things that you have to hold on to no matter what? But that doesn't mean you have to hold on to everything. You have to determine these things, because keeping control of your ministry will keep it small. And if you're bringing people in as coaches, as leaders, and you're trying to maintain pretty strict control over the whole thing, you're going to end up with a lot of very frustrated people. And I know that from what I put people through myself. All right, let's talk for a minute about the seventh mistake. And the seventh mistake is a lack of accountability. So you have coaches, but what are they doing? Well, in order to find out what coaches are doing, you have to ask them. You either have to have a personal conversation with them, or you have to have some kind of reporting system. But here's the deal. You inspect what you expect. So going back, we figured out what coaches are supposed to do. We've given them clear expectations. And now we need to go back and make sure that they are doing the things that they agreed to do. And sometimes we think, but won't people resent it? I mean, we don't like to hold people accountable because we feel like we're being the bad guy. I mean, asking people if they've done the things we expect them to do. I mean, we're about as eager to do that as having the sex talk with our kids. You know what I'm saying? And it's necessary, but you feel like it's awkward, and that may just be me. I don't know about anybody else. But anyway, people aren't going to resent it, because won't they feel unimportant if you don't? Won't your coaches feel unimportant? You've asked them to do an important role. You've invited them in to care and to serve leaders. You've invited them in to care and supervise new leaders that are just starting out. And this is important. So the assignment is for the coaches to call the brand new leaders that are just starting the group. If the assignment is to make that call once a week, how do you know the calls are being made? Well, you pick up the phone and ask them. What are you hearing from your leaders? Oh, I haven't made my calls. Oh, well, why don't you make your calls over the next couple of days, and I'll call you back on Friday and see how it's going. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things that we have to pay attention to. And again, it's a matter of knowing what to give this when it needs it, because otherwise, we'll get into trouble. All right, now I'm getting ahead of myself here. So the other side of accountability is what I would call heavy-handed accountability. So I was working with a church in the Pittsburgh area, and they actually had to end their coaching. See, their coaches were responsible for collecting attendance and reporting problems. And the coaching performance was based on accomplishing these tasks. So were they connecting with these leaders? Were they collecting these reports? And was all of that working for them? And sorry, I have something that's trying. There we go. I had to get rid of something off on my screen. All right. Uh-oh. Okay. And we're back with another problem. Isn't that always the way? Trying to do something and other things get in your way here. All right. All right. Somebody tell me in the chat box if you can see mistake number 8 on your screen. Okay. So I have confirmation you can see number 8, because I got all kinds of mess going on my screen. So thank you. All right. Now back to our regular program. I thought I had everything shut down on my computer. All right. So coaching becomes performance-based, and so the reporting structure becomes rather heavy-handed. So the whole thing is we need to collect the role. We need to know who is in the group. We need to know who is on your roster. Why didn't you turn in your report? And like I said, one church I was working with in Pittsburgh, this became so intense that they actually just had to end their coaching structure, because even though they knew they needed coaches, this had gone to such an extreme that it gave coaching a bad name. Nobody wanted to interact with the coach. Nobody wanted to return a coach's phone call, because this just became very, very legalistic and very, very tense. And so they decided to do away with it for a season. All right, mistake number 9. Move along here. Mistake number 9 is having too many direct reports. And I kind of hinted at this a little bit ago. But how many people can you actually keep up with? You know, you need to make a determination of what that number is for yourself. And it's not everybody. See, it's not every group leader. It's not every ministry leader if you're over multiple areas in addition to groups. Sometimes you can't even keep up with every coach. You know, I was in a system in a church that was less than 1,000. And so I interacted with coaches. But then when I came to Greenville and I was at this church of 6,500, well, I had a leadership team. And the leadership team had coaches. The coaches had leaders. Now, that doesn't mean that I would never talk to a coach or a leader. But the reality was that somebody's saying I'm still showing number 8 on the screen. I apologize. I am a professional and all. There we go. All right. So hopefully you see number 9 now. It always has to be the day that I'm getting a lot of people on the webinar. All right. Do you guys see number 9 now? Okay. Thank you, Jill. All right. So too many people to keep up with, not every group leader, not every ministry leader, sometimes not every coach. So how many people should you keep up with? I mean, how many people do you meet with on a regular basis? And then if you're beyond a certain size, then how many people do you bring coaches in? And they meet with a certain number of people, you meet with a certain number of coaches. And then when you get to the point where the coaches have too many people or too many people for you to meet with, then you need that next layer of leadership of leaders then. And that you meet with those, that top tier of leaders, they meet with coaches, coaches meet with leaders, with group leaders. And the way that I know this works, we called them directors at first, and then that name kind of got to people's heads. So we switched directors to community leaders, which I know Saddleback uses that term, but it wasn't the same kind of community leaders as Saddleback. All of that to say, I took one of these directors to lunch one day, and he was over all the couples groups, and there were about 65 couples groups at the time. And he had a spreadsheet, and it listed every one of his coaches, and then underneath the names of his coaches, every single one of the groups. And he sat at lunch and he told me personally, personal things about every single coach and every single group and what the groups were studying and who the leaders were and how the groups were going. And he had it perfect until he got down to the last couple of groups, and they were fairly new, and he didn't quite have that information yet. He's not reading anything to me. He's not turning in a report off the top of his head. He could tell me from what he learned from his coaches, everything that was going on in his particular area of groups. Now, not all of them did that well. I found out later that some of them didn't know what was expected. It was a system I inherited, and I kind of learned the hard way on that. But I think sometimes we have to ask ourselves, who else should be involved? Who else should we involve? But when you think about this, this is a really cool opportunity. That when you are looking for, what Bill Hybels calls a big L leader, those leaders of leaders of leaders, people that can think strategically with you, people that can manage, coaching relationships, and then the coaches oversee the leaders, that when you have people that are in the workplace that have high level jobs, this creates a new leadership opportunity. When I look back at my group when I had at our church in California, they were coaches, so it was a smaller church. But I had one guy who was a retired school district superintendent. I had another guy that he was very friendly, can just connect with a lot of people. I had one guy that this was risky, he was in multi-level marketing. And yet I saw how he managed relationships. And I said, I'd love to have you in this thing. You just got to keep your product out of it. And he did. I had a guy that had been in ministry that was serving in recovery. In fact, I just saw him last weekend when I was out in California. So anyway, I picked people that were very capable, that were currently leading groups, but then they had all of this other ability that was being utilized in the marketplace, but it wasn't being utilized in the church. And so we used them with their abilities in our small group ministry. And same with the church here in Greenville, was that I was able to involve people on a volunteer basis that were people I could never afford to hire. And that really was a wonderful thing to be able to operate with that level of leadership. And of course, the challenge is that in order to lead those kinds of leaders, you have to continue to grow your own leadership. And you don't have to be like a mile ahead of them, but you have to be a little bit ahead of them. But what I found has helped more than anything else was running this not as I'm at the top of the pyramid and you guys are beneath me. It was working with a leadership team and serving as equals and learning things together and problem solving things together. Because as my friend Carl George says, all of us is smarter than any one of us. And I found that to be the case in both of these groups. All right, the 10th mistake is this. I call it identical coaching. You coach every leader exactly the same. This is a mistake. Now think about your family members. You know, they probably don't even like the same movies. Like I said, my kids are 16, 12, 10, and 2. And then my wife and I, the 6 of us, never in a million years would all decide on, on the same movie unless we were going to see Bambi or something, and my boys would be like rolling their eyes going, oh, brother. I don't know. They probably would cry and I would cry too, to be honest with you. But, when you think about that, it's like my 4-year-old, he has certain tastes. He likes Paw Patrol. That's what he's into these days. My daughter, she went out with her friends and they saw Ferdinand in the movie theater. Now, my boys, my 12-year-old, my 16-year-old, I mean, they're big into Star Wars and things like that. If my wife had a choice, she would choose one of those Hallmark movies, which I won't say anything negative about because people love Hallmark movies. But, honestly, it's the same movie over and over again. But I didn't say that. I would pick something like, The Showman or, something like that that's out there, P.T. Barnum. And, it all would be very interesting. But for all of us to decide, my wife would probably take the 2 younger ones to see something. I would probably take the boys to see Star Wars. But it's hard, for all of us to settle because we have different tastes and we're in different places in our life, our growth, our development. Well, here's the thing. Experienced leaders don't need basic training. And when we start out with coaching, what we typically do is we kind of go down to the lowest common denominator, and that is the new leader that needs a lot of basic stuff. And then the experienced leaders, they don't need this. But new leaders, on the other hand, they don't need to have a lot of space, because if we're meeting with our new leaders infrequently, like we might be with our experienced leaders, our new leaders are going to get lost. Our new leaders are going to get discouraged. They're going to quit. See, our general training ends up being kind of basic training, and then we wonder why our meetings are half full. Last summer, I sat with a group, and I won't say where or who or anything like that, but I sat with a group of small group pastors from across the country, and they came down to this dilemma of, what do you train your leaders on? What do you give your leaders? And the idea came up, why don't you ask your leaders what they need? And everybody around the table has their pen out and they're writing in their notes, ask my leaders what they need. Now, that seems like a no-brainer, but that wasn't a no-brainer for me for a long time, because I would read the books and I would read articles and I would gather all this information, and then I would come up with some kind of training, and I would spend a lot of effort answering questions that nobody was asking. And so new leaders, they need to know, how do you handle childcare? Because if people are coming to their house with kids and you don't know how to handle childcare, your group is not going to last very long. But if you have experienced leaders and they're sitting in a meeting to learn how to handle childcare, they dealt with that problem years ago. Their kids are probably grown and gone by now. They don't need that lesson. So we have to customize training to who it is that we're training and what exactly it is that they need. So you want healthy, lasting groups, but some things are maybe getting in your way. And so I want to guide you through a proven plan to build your coaching structure and to keep healthy, lasting groups. Now, when you guys signed up for this webinar, you actually took a little bit of a survey that I had done about 6 months ago with churches from around North America. And the survey told us this. These are your survey results, not the North American survey. But 66% of you said your biggest issue is identifying and recruiting coaches. 63% of you said it was training coaches. 34% said supervising coaches. 32% said creating a job description, and then also and you could vote on more than one of these, obviously, you took the survey. But another 32% said lack of communication between coaches and leaders. And then I kind of asked you what stage you were in. And some people said, coaches, what coaches? Some have felt kind of resistance to coaching, that leaders didn't really want that. Some have just started, recruiting some coaches. The small group pastor was running the huddle or the round tables. Again, some were just starting out. If you had a seasoned coaching structure, good for you. And then one was very honest. Maybe this is one of you, and said, our coaching is too various to describe. And so I want to share a couple of things with you. And these are some of the churches that I worked with in this last year to kind of help them with their coaching, and through an online course that I've developed. So here's the deal, because you're going to get into like the quote unquote sales pitch now. So if you will tolerate this and stay with me to the end of the webinar, don't just leave the app running, because I will know. All right. But if you stay with the end, I'm going to give you an article I did for smallgroups.com called the Exodus 10 Coaching Strategy. And we'll give you a little sense of kind of what I'm doing. But here's what I want to present to you today is this new course, the online course I've developed called Coaching Exponential Groups. And so here are the sessions. In session one is developing your coaching structure. So this is the idea of something that's built on a biblical model. It would be customized for your church setting. I don't do anything that's cookie cutter, because there are no two churches that are exactly the same. You would grow your personal leadership, and then you would overcome the need for control that I was talking about a little bit ago. Session 2, what do coaches do? The role of a coach. So what expectations do we have for them? Maybe an example of a job description. Maybe talk about different coaching philosophies. Talk about different stages of coaching, and then communication throughout your entire ministry. And that's what we do in session 2. Session 3 is on identifying and recruiting coaches, which was a big need among this group. And so we talk about qualifications for coaching, who can do it, who can't. What if they already lead a group? How do they coach and lead a group? Can they do that? We talk about the importance of the role of coaching. We're going to help coaches develop their gifts and use their gifts. And then using a team approach in coaching. Then once we've identified and recruited them, then in session 4, we're going to talk about training new coaches. And so we'll talk about both initial and ongoing training. And this has taken, I'll be honest, over the last 27 years, this has taken some figuring out. But I have found some things that are working in these areas. How to effectively use metrics. So, okay, we need attendance reports. We need hard data. That's not all the data we need. We also need soft data. But how do we use that in an effective way, other than just to say, oh, look how many groups we have, look how awesome we are? Because I don't think it's for bragging rights. There's some very practical purposes of why we need data. Specialized coaching for different leaders. And we need to focus on that as well. Session 5, discipling coaches and leaders. And this one may feel a little bit personal, but this is kind of my soapbox right now, is that it used to be, when you read the literature from 30, 40 years ago about small groups were about discipleship. And where small groups have gone in some cases is that small groups have become about assimilation. Now, that's not a bad thing, unless it's the only thing that your small groups are doing. Because we are called to make disciples. We're called to teach people to obey all that Jesus commanded us. We are not called to assimilate people into the Borg. And you have to be a Trekkie to understand that. So sorry about that. So in this, we're going to talk about a discipleship model I've developed called How People Grow. We're talking about spiritual next steps for coaches, for leaders, for group members. And then lastly, in session 6, we're going to talk about equipping coaches. And this would be running drills with your coach. How do you get them prepared for when those questions come from groups of how do you handle this? How to make effective group visits. And there are different visits, types of visits for different reasons. How to resource your coaches for success. Even getting down to, when can the coach make the call on what's done in a situation, and when does that need to be reported back to you? I'm also in this course doing a bonus session called Personality Types and Coaching. And what that means is that you kind of come to understand your personal coaching style. out of who you are? And then how do you apply that to other situations? So how do you coach different types of people? Because some people need coaching the way that you would need coaching, but some people are completely different from you, and their coaching needs to come about in a different way. What is your personality type? And so in this, you would take an online assessment, you would discover your core personality type, and then you would apply the principles to coaching other people. Okay, I'm almost done, so hang in there. All right, what's the investment? Well, let me go this way. How much is the lack of coaching costing you? How many group leaders have burned out or quit? And I know we can't keep all of them. How many training meetings are half empty? Are your leaders and groups intentionally growing? How many times do you answer the phone to talk to leader after leader who needs support? You see, a lack of coaching might be costing you a great deal in the overall effectiveness and impact of your ministry. So let me give you some details about the course. There are 3 packages that you can choose from. The basic package is that you would receive all 6 sessions that I just described on video, audio, transcript, and then you would get the slide deck for them. You would receive a course workbook. You would receive articles, job descriptions, coaching questions, other kinds of resources, and I'll be continuing to add to this, but other things that are going to kind of help to supplement the course for you. You would have a lifetime membership, so you have lifetime access to the course. So you never need to buy it again. You can use it. You know, if there are things you need now, you need to train some new coaches, you can, go back in and use it again. It's not going to go away. You also have a 30-day guarantee. So if you get into this and you start looking at it and maybe you start using it and then you're like, this is not for me, this is not the right thing, then you know what? Let me know and I will give you all of your money back. So I'm assuming all of the risk here. And so within 30 days, if you don't want to keep the course, just let me know and I'll give you all of your money back. And so you don't need to worry about, oh, is this going to be a mistake getting into this thing? I'm going to take all of the risk. This is also an upgradable resource to maybe a future coaching group. I have 2 online courses. I have this one. I have one that's called Leading an Exponential Group Launch. And so both of those courses I use in my coaching group. So Aldrin, that's on this webinar, is going to be in my coaching group that starts in March. So Aldrin, this is part of your coaching group. I saw your question just pop up. If you purchase the package now and then later on you decide to be in a coaching group, I'm not going to make you pay for this course twice. So whatever you've paid previously on the course, I would apply it to the coaching group so that you don't have to pay double. You'd also get 1 assessment for the personality types and coaching bonus. And so the cost of a basic package is $249 or 4 payments of $97. Now, here's a little bonus for you now, is that if you enroll, if you sign up for the online coaching course right now, while this webinar is still going, and I can see the day and time that somebody purchases it, I'm going to give you an hour of one-on-one coaching session for free. And normally that's something that churches pay $150 for. So if you say, okay, I want this basic coaching package, sign me up, I'll get the free hour, then you have to put in the www.coachingexponentialgroups.com and then / enroll. And I just put that in the chat box. So if you sign up during the webinar, then I'll give you that hour for free. So you get a little bonus if you sign up today. All right, so let's go on. There are a couple more packages. The Pro package is the same thing that we just talked about, everything that's in the basic package. And then we would add this. Instead of having 1 assessment for the personality types and coaching bonus, I would give you 10 assessments. You would be invited into a private Facebook group with me so that we can interact online. We can interact, anytime you have questions about coaching. As a group, we can talk about coaching in Facebook, and it's a good opportunity. There are also going to be 3 teleconferences that are going to be more Q&A, not like this. It's going to be open mics. Let's have a discussion. And those are going to occur on February 7th, February 21st and March the 7th. And so if you choose this pro package, you're included in all of those teleconferences. The cost for the pro is $499 or 6 payments of $97. And again, you can go to, don't forget the www in there. Okay, last one, and we're almost there. The expert package, you get 25 assessments for the personality types and coaching. And instead of having to view the course on your own, that we could actually get your team together, whether it's your staff, whether it's your new coaches, whether it's your leadership team, and that I would actually do a live meeting with you to go through the results of what we find for your personality types, and then how those types function with other personality types, especially when you're coaching them. Again, the private Facebook group, live Q&A, and then you would have 3 one-on-one coaching sessions with me and you at whatever point you want to do this as you're working through the course. The expert package is $11.99 or 6 payments of $249. So what do? You want to enroll in one of the packages before Thursday, the 25th, which today is Tuesday, the 23rd. So on Thursday night at midnight, the cart closes, and this is not going to come back for a while. So to sign up online, again, coachingexponentialgroups.com/enroll, and you can sign up. If you need to pay by check, you can contact me at info@alanwhite.org, and you can pay by check. All right. So to receive the bonus, which is the article on the Exodus 10 coaching model, in the chat box, I want you to answer this question. And the question is this. Which is your biggest coaching challenge? Developing a coaching structure, defining the coaching role, and you can just put the number. Identifying and recruiting leaders, training new coaches, discipling coaches and leaders, equipping coaches, or identifying your personal coaching style. So let me know that you're still alive and still out there, and go ahead in the chat box, give me your number, and then this is my way of seeing who's naughty and who's nice. And so Aldrin says number 5, Ed says number 5, Liliana says 4, Sam says 5. Hi Sam, I was just out in San Francisco. Kevin says 3. Phil's just went by. Phil's got 2. Waiting for name says 6. You got to tell me your name or I'm not going to know who to send this to. Jill says 4. Bart says number 1. Pam says number 5. Anybody else? Anybody still on? Anybody still paying attention? Did anybody walk out of the room? All right. So anyway, now I know you're alive. I know who's been good. And then the other thing, of course, is that after we're done, send me a copy of your notes. So I'm going to open this up for questions. And this isn't just questions about the coaching package. But I do want to remind you, if you register before the session's over, I am going to give you the free hour that we could talk about coaching. We can talk about whatever you want. But you drive that. Again, to sign up online, www.coachingexponentialgroups.com/enroll, or you can shoot me an email, and we'll figure out how you can pay by check. So I'm going to open it up for questions. If you want to talk to me, you can feel free at this point to turn on your microphone, because if dogs are barking or baby's crying, that's the way it goes. Or you can ask a question in the chat window there. All right, so Liliana is asking about one-on-one. The one-on-ones are 1 hour in length, and there's no set schedule. It's like whenever you're available, whenever you're in need of that one-on-one session, then you can actually take your one-on-one session then. All right, any other questions or thoughts? I know I went fast. It's like a fire hose, isn't it? And I apologize. I wanted to keep it to an hour. I did pretty good. I got 5 minutes. So I'll stay on for a little bit. If you guys have questions, you can, about coaching, about, the meaning of life, anything you want to do. Yes, 60 minutes is correct, Liliana. And believe me, when you go from pastoring to coaching churches, I'll be honest with you, to try to put a numerical value on your time is like the weirdest thing in the world. So anyway, I just had to, I don't remember how I figured it out, but I just figured it out. So anyway, all right, guys. Questions, thoughts? Feel free to turn on your mic or speak up, write something in the chat box there. We'll be happy to spend a few minutes with you guys and answer any questions that you might have. I'm not seeing anything yet. Maybe everybody's registering for the course. That'd be awesome. All right. Well, I'm not going to keep you if you don't have a question. But yeah, feel free. If you have any questions about the registration. Oh, here we go. Aldrin is here. Based on your experience, is it difficult to develop coaches among the leaders, elders, and deacons of the church? Actually, it's not. And I think when you get to the point of giving authority to coaches, the idea of elders and deacons may actually be the right way to go if they're willing to do it, if they care enough about the leaders to pick up the phone. But I think someone in that role would be ideal. They don't have to be in that role. So I'm talking on both sides of my mouth. But I think you could certainly, bring them in and involve them. I think sometimes too, you want to look at people that maybe are not the usual suspects. Not everybody is going after them. And sometimes some of the most unlikely people will make some of your best leaders. Question about the assessment. Will you give an explanation of the styles? Yes. So there is a 1-hour session that's recorded in the bonus session on the styles. And so you go online, you take the assessment. Now it's not automated yet. So you take the assessment, and then you would put in your name and your email. Nobody else is going to see this except you. And then we'll calculate the assessment. We'll send your results back to you, and then you can go on to the course and view the session, and it will tell you, explain all of the personality styles. It'll tell you, which you can figure out which one yours is. We'll have the name pretty clear, and then how your personality style is going to interact with others. The other thing is, this is not just for solo use. You can actually use this with your team if it's applicable. Ed's asking, what is the first step to find a coach? Recruiting. I recruited first, and then I defined it, and I got kind of in a bit of a mess. So I think if you think of what are the things that you need coaches to do, and we do talk about specifics in the course, I would line out what you want them to do. I would keep it simple at first. Maybe have the new coaches work with new leaders, because new coaches, especially if they have background in small groups, are going to be able to answer the questions that new leaders are asking. So have an idea of what you want them to do, and then begin to recruit with that idea in mind. And it may morph a little bit over time, but I think when you recruit them and say, okay, go out there and coach, they don't have a clue of what to do, and then they feel guilty because they're not doing anything, and you get frustrated. You want to avoid that. So have a clear idea of where to go with coaching, and then begin to invite good people that you like, people that you trust. It's a good place to start. All right, Sam, you got to go to another meeting. I see you said there. Goodbye. Next time in San Francisco, I'll look you up. Okay, so Carolyn Scott wants to sign up for basic. So yeah, just go to the red URL on the screen there, the www.coachingexponentialgroups.com/enroll. And I can put it again here in the box just so that everybody has that. Let me type the right thing in because I don't want to send you to the wrong place. And as soon as you register, then you are in and you can start learning about coaching this afternoon. All right. Okay, Aldrin's asking, do you agree that a coach should be a small group leader first or have experience leading a group? I think preferably if somebody has led a group and has some small group experience, I think they would make a really terrific coach. I think sometimes if you're new and starting out, if you don't have experienced people that will help you do it, people with small group experience help you, I would just invite mature people that would be willing to help. And they have general leadership, and then whatever is missing, then of course you can train them and help them develop that. Question: how do you deal with leadership that is pushing assimilation versus discipleship? I think that the fact that leadership is pushing groups is actually to your benefit. And so if they're concerned about assimilation, which any large church, any size church, you want to make sure that people are connected to somebody, then by all means, follow their lead. If they can advocate for groups that way, if they can champion groups that way, then let that happen. But then on the other side, and this doesn't take any of their permission, then you begin to plan out for your groups, for your leaders, a pathway to disciple them. And I have a specific pathway that I present. Some of it is the content that you study. Some of it is how you study it. And I'm to the point anymore that, if you go through a small group lesson and it's only a change in knowledge, people know a lot of things. But what about their attitudes? What about their behaviors? How's it truly affecting their lives? So rather than saying, "Oh wow, that was a good meeting, can't wait till next week, I learned so much," I don't want them to learn so much. I want them to live so much. You know what I'm saying? Understand what I'm saying? So I would almost say at the end of a meeting, have them take on an assignment, have them take on a goal. And then the next week, one of the first questions they're asked in the meeting was, "Last week you accepted a challenge. You took on a goal. You took on an assignment. How did that go for you this week?" Because I live in the South. I've been here for over 10 years now. And it's not just the South, but the South are three religions. There's church, college football, and barbecue, not necessarily in that order. And everybody goes to church because it's part of the culture. And yet you look at the news, you hear conversations, and people are racist, and people are prejudiced, and people are mean, and the level of domestic abuse. And I know that happens other places too, but this is the environment I'm living in right now. And I'm thinking, how does all of that church going even benefit people? Because they're participating, and just because they're at a church doesn't make them a Christian, just because they're in a barn doesn't make them a cow. You know what I'm saying? So where's that place where we're living it out? I was really taken aback by the last line of the Great Commission, and it's been about a year ago. And as I'm reading the Great Commission, and at the end of it, Jesus says, "And teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you." And I honestly looked at that verse and I thought, when did they put the word obey in there? Because the way we've gone about Christian education is we teach people what Jesus commanded, believing that once they knew what Jesus commanded, I'm going to be preaching now, once they knew what Jesus commanded, that then they would start to do those things. And yet what we end up with is we have people that are educated well beyond their level of obedience, as D.L. Moody once said. Or maybe it was Howard Hendricks. One of the two. One of them said it. And so my idea is, okay, get them into, if the focus of groups is assimilation, get them into groups for assimilation. And then once they're in groups, begin to go about discipling them. I don't know that anybody's going to get in trouble for helping their people grow. And so I don't think that has to be an argument of I need to get everybody on board. Take what you've got from your leadership and then begin to, allow that to continue. So, all right. Any other thoughts or questions? I'll stay on here for another minute or so. I gave a big answer to the last question, but you got me going. All right. Any other takers? Well, if as soon as we hang up, you think of your question, then feel free to send me an email. And I'll be more than happy to answer your question. If you have any questions about the course, send me an email as well. And I'll shoot one out to you in a few minutes so that you have all of the correct information about the course. But most of the questions about the course are going to be addressed on that enrollment page. And anyway, love to have you in this. If this makes sense for you, like I said, if you get in it, you're completely dissatisfied with it, let me know, and I'll give you your money back. I don't want to end on that. I think this will benefit you. And the reason I did this is just from my experience that when I had a good coaching structure in place, more of my new groups actually started. And my leaders across the board were better. And then here's the other piece. Having the coaches doing the work of looking in on the leaders and answering questions and solving a lot of problems, it lightened the load on me. And that was huge because I knew that as our church was growing, that my responsibilities were also growing and that God was leading us into some new territory to develop some new things. And if I had stayed where I was without a coaching structure trying to lead the small group ministry, first of all, the group ministry wouldn't have gotten as big as it was. And second of all, I would not have had the time or the ability to actually pour myself into anything else because I was still bogged down, with trying to answer leader questions and do all the training and all that sort of thing. And I don't say that because I think, people should be lazy. People in ministry are not lazy. But I think you, like me, you need help. And so, find the help, train them, And I think this course will help you do it. And that's the reason I put it together. All right. So God bless you. If you have any other questions, feel free to kick me an email. And thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.